I suspected the new transfer student in our department had been reborn. She always managed to beat me to the punch, snatching away every single opportunity that was supposed to fall into my lap. Competition slots, faculty research projects, public presentations. She even managed to guess the exact location of the research materials I was about to hand in before I even opened my mouth. After having my opportunities hijacked for the third time in a row, I deleted the entire proposal I was supposed to submit, leaving nothing but an empty file in its place. She ran up to the podium, hugging her laptop to her chest, and flashed a bright smile. "Professor, I've already organized everything for Roselyn." The projector flickered on. The lecture hall fell dead silent. I looked up at her, my face a mask of absolute confusion. What proposal? The air conditioning in the lecture hall was broken. Waves of heavy, suffocating heat pressed down from the ceiling. The projector screen glowed with an ashy white light, and the smell of chalk dust mixed with cheap coffee drifted into my nose. I sat in the third row, my fingers resting lightly on the edge of my laptop, watching Patricia up on the podium. She was wearing a creamy white blouse. Her hair was tied back in a low, effortless ponytail, the sleeves rolled up to her forearms. In her arms, she was hugging my laptop bag. Or, to be more precise, a laptop bag that looked exactly like mine. She stood there with perfect posture, wearing the exact kind of smile that made professors nod in approval and put classmates at ease. "Professor Davis, Roselyn hasn't been feeling well the past few days. I was worried she wouldn't be able to finish her presentation in time, so I went ahead and organized the materials for her." A few heads turned to look at me. I didn't move a muscle. Patricia plugged her flash drive into the computer. Her finger swiped across the trackpad, and a file name popped up on the projector screen. Urban Historic District Commercial Revitalization Proposal, Final Version. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor echoed through the room. I heard my roommate, Chloe, suck in a sharp breath next to me. She grabbed my sleeve, dropping her voice to a frantic whisper. "Roselyn, isn't that the topic you've been killing yourself over for the past 2 weeks?" I stared at the projector screen, a single thought popping into my head. Oh. Here we go again. Patricia double-clicked the file. White screen. Empty. It wasn't that the content was still loading. From the first slide to the last, it was completely blank. There was a title, and absolutely nothing else. Not even page numbers. The low hum of whispers in the classroom instantly died. Patricia's smile froze on her face. Her finger swiped down the trackpad a few more times. The pages flipped by, one after another. All of them pure white. Her throat bobbed. I could see the veins on the back of her hand bulging. Maybe the file got corrupted. I stood up. The legs of my chair scraped harshly against the floor tiles, the sound setting teeth on edge. Professor Davis frowned at me. "Roselyn, what is the meaning of this?" I closed my laptop, hugged it to my chest, and kept my voice perfectly level. "Professor, I have absolutely no idea what proposal she's talking about." Patricia's head snapped up. I looked at her, my eyes even more innocent than hers. "The topic I registered for this week is Community Elderly Care Services Research. Not Historic District Commercial Revitalization." Chloe froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Someone in the back row muttered, but Patricia just said she organized the materials for Roselyn. How did she even know Roselyn was going to do the Historic District topic? And the file is completely empty. What exactly did she organize? The hand Patricia was using to grip the mouse trembled. The mouse hit the desk with a loud clack. She opened her mouth to speak, then swallowed the words back down. Professor Davis looked at her, then looked at me. His expression darkened. "Patricia, who authorized you to submit her materials on her behalf?" Patricia pressed her lips together tightly. It took her 2 full seconds to finally force the words out. I just heard her mention this topic before. I was afraid she was running out of time. I blinked. "When exactly did I ever mention it to you?" She choked. The broken AC unit hummed loudly above us. The hot air blew across the loose strands of hair on her forehead. A fine layer of sweat broke out on her temples, and her carefully crafted smile slowly disintegrated. I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and turned the screen toward Professor Davis. "Professor, this is the research topic I submitted to the portal last night. The timestamp is right here." Professor Davis looked down at the screen. The light from my phone reflected off his glasses. Patricia stared at that timestamp, her fingernails digging so hard into her palms that the cuffs of her pristine blouse wrinkled. I added casually, "As for the historic district topic, I actually scrapped that idea last week. I realized the data was too difficult to source." Professor Davis looked up. "Patricia, step down." Patricia stood there, completely paralyzed. She had already walked up to the stage. She had already said the words. She had already prepared to steal my presentation slot right out from under me. But when she reached out to grab the prize, her hand closed around empty air. I walked past her, up onto the podium, and plugged my own laptop into the projector. The first slide popped up. It was a photo of the rusted, peeling iron sign outside a local nursing home. The second slide was my interview logs. The third was a data spreadsheet. The fourth was a series of on-site photographs. I heard someone in the audience whisper, she really did change her topic. Then what the hell was Patricia trying to pull just now? Professor Davis flipped through my physical materials, his frown easing slightly. Patricia stood frozen by the side of the podium, her shoulders stiff as a board. I didn't even look at her. I just faced the class and said, my presentation begins now. The light from the projector washed over my face, the brightness stinging my dry eyes. Deep down, I let out a very soft, quiet laugh. You thought you knew exactly which road I was going to take. So I decided to go off-roading. The first time I realized there was something seriously wrong with Patricia was the day we registered for the university-wide event planning competition. It was pouring rain that day. A layer of muddy water pooled outside the administration building. Dripping umbrellas left a mess all over the floor. The student council office was packed shoulder to shoulder, the printer chugging away in the corner. I was holding my registration form, waiting in line. There were 3 people ahead of me. Chloe was standing right beside me, holding 2 cups of hot soy milk. The plastic bag was digging into her fingers, turning her knuckles white. She shoved 1 cup into my hands. Drink it fast before it gets cold and tastes weird. I had barely taken my first sip when a soft, sweet voice drifted through the office door. Excuse me, I'm here to submit my application for the planning competition. Patricia walked in, clutching a glossy folder to her chest. She had just transferred to the university a week prior. She smiled at everyone she met, and she always spoke a half-beat slower than normal, as if she was terrified of startling people. The faculty advisor took her application, flipped through a few pages, and his eyes instantly lit up. This is a fantastic concept. Converting unused campus spaces. It fits perfectly with this year's theme. My teeth froze around the plastic straw. Chloe looked at me, her eyes wide. Wait, isn't that the exact same topic you chose? I nodded. Not only was it the same topic, the specific angle was identical. I was planning to propose converting the abandoned bicycle sheds in the North Campus into a late-night study corner. I had literally just talked to Chloe about it in our dorm the night before. Chloe had even teased me, asking why I was neurotic enough to go out and count the exact number of light bulbs currently in the sheds. Patricia pushed her folder slightly closer to the advisor, her voice sickly sweet. I went over to the North Campus yesterday and took a look. It's such a waste to leave those sheds empty. If we turn them into a study corner, students heading back to the dorms late at night could actually use them. When she finished speaking, she turned her head and looked right at me. It was a split-second glance, so fast that no one else in the room caught it. But I saw the smile hiding in her eyes. It was the look of a spoiled child who had just snatched someone else's candy, a smug satisfaction she couldn't completely hide. The advisor didn't even hesitate. He immediately wrote her name down on the recommendation list. By the time it was my turn to submit my form, the advisor looked troubled. Roselyn, you and Patricia have the exact same topic. Her materials are a bit more fleshed out. Would you consider switching yours? I gripped the registration form. The corner of the paper had gotten soaked in the rain, turning mushy beneath my thumb. Chloe was furious. Professor, Roselyn has been working on this for weeks. Patricia immediately walked over, lowering her eyelashes in a perfect display of guilt. I'm so sorry. I honestly had no idea Roselyn was doing the same topic. Should I withdraw my application? She said the word withdraw, but her arms hugged the folder even tighter against her chest. A dozen pairs of eyes in the office turned to look at us. If I told her to withdraw, I would look petty and jealous. If I didn't, I would be swallowing a massive loss. I looked down at the form in my hand, folded it neatly in half, and shoved it back into my bag. No need. You take it. Patricia let out a very audible sigh of relief. She thought I didn't notice. The second time was when Ivy Design Studio came to campus recruiting for interns. The founder of Ivy Studio was Jack Vance. I had been following his work obsessively for 3 years. I knew for a fact that after every campus recruitment seminar, he would stay behind for exactly 10 extra minutes, purely to review students' personal portfolios. The night before the seminar, I stayed up until 3 a.m. printing and binding my portfolio. The binding wire slipped and sliced my finger open. A tiny drop of blood smeared on the inside of the back cover. The next day, the lecture hall was packed. People were standing in the aisles behind the chairs. The heat from the stage lights made my back sweat. Jack stood on the stage, the sleeves of his black dress shirt rolled up to his elbows. He didn't use notes when he presented his projects. His finger tapped casually against the laser pointer, his voice low but commanding enough to hold the entire room hostage. I sat in the second row, my portfolio resting on my knees. I had wiped the cover clean 3 times. The moment the seminar ended, before I could even stand up, Patricia practically sprinted from the back of the room, completely bypassing the aisles, and planted herself directly in front of Jack. Mr. Vance, I read the case study on your factory revitalization project from last year. I actually did a similar mock-up exercise. Would you mind taking a quick look? She handed him her portfolio. The cover image was a revitalized factory. Even more coincidentally, her core design philosophy was exactly the same as mine, utilizing natural light zoning instead of hard physical partitions. Jack took the portfolio. When he flipped to the third page, he paused. You have a very distinct perspective on spatial flow. Patrika smiled brightly. I just think that the very first thing a person sees when they step into a space is far more important than how much furniture you manage to cram into it. That exact sentence was written on the title page of my portfolio. I had never posted it online. I had only read it out loud to Chloe in the privacy of our dorm room. All the color drained from Chloe's face. She grabbed my wrist, her voice tense. Is she eavesdropping on us? I didn't answer. I just watched Patrika standing in front of Jack. Her back was perfectly straight. Her eyes were burning with an intense, calculated ambition. That wasn't the look of someone who had just overheard a clever quote in passing. It was the look of someone who knew for an absolute fact that that specific sentence would make Jack stop and pay attention. Jack asked her to leave her email. My 10 minutes were gone. That night, I sat at my desk in the dorm, flipping through my portfolio over and over again. The rain outside had finally stopped. Delivery scooters buzzed past the building one after another, their sharp, electronic horns piercing the quiet night. Chloe was lying on my bed, fuming. Is she psychotic? Once is a coincidence, but twice. And she hits the nail on the head so perfectly both times? I pressed my thumb against the dried blood stain on the back cover. It's not a coincidence. It's because she already knows. But how the hell did she know? The third time was the historic district presentation. Before that presentation, I only did one thing. I sat in my dorm, making sure Chloe was in the room, and I loudly announced that I was definitely moving forward with the historic district topic. I then created an empty file, named it Final Version, and slapped it right in the middle of my desktop where anyone could see it. My actual, brand new topic was locked in an encrypted folder on my cloud drive. All my interview notes were saved directly to my phone. Chloe asked me, "Are you fishing for her?" I hit save on the empty file and closed my laptop. Not exactly. Then what are you doing? I looked out the window. The streetlights illuminated the wet pavement, the reflection of the dorm building rippling in the puddles. I'm waiting to see if she actually takes the bait. And she did. She took it hook, line, and sinker. After the historic district presentation blew up in her face, Patrika laid low for 2 days. She stopped trying to talk to me. She dropped the whole friendly, helpful new girl act. But she started watching me a lot more. Waiting in line at the cafeteria, in the stairwell of the library, hovering near the sign-in sheet before lectures, she was constantly lurking just at the edge of my peripheral vision, clutching her phone, the screen lighting up and going dark over and over. Chloe was totally creeped out. Do you think she knows you're onto her? I pushed the green peppers to the side of my lunch tray. She doesn't know. How can you be so sure? If she knew I was onto her, she wouldn't be staring at me like that. Chloe didn't get it. I didn't bother explaining. A person who survives by stealing the answer key is absolutely terrified when the teacher suddenly changes the test. She wasn't investigating me. She was desperately trying to figure out if the answers she had memorized were somehow flawed. On Friday afternoon, the department sent out a mass notification. The upcoming university anniversary exhibition needed a team of students to curate the main pavilion. The prize was $5,000, the final project would be featured on the university's official website, and representatives from Ivy Studio were confirmed to attend. The second the message hit the group chat, my phone started buzzing off the hook. Chloe sent me a screenshot. Roselyn, you have to apply for this. Jack Vance is going to be there. I stared at the words Ivy Studio, my finger hovering over the screen. Jack Vance. After the seminar, I honestly thought my shot was completely gone. But as the crowd was clearing out that day, he had walked past me, and suddenly stopped. His eyes had dropped to the portfolio resting on my knees, zeroing in on the tiny, smeared bloodstain on the back cover. Is that yours? I nodded. He held out his hand. May I see it? Before I could even hand it to him, Patrika shouted from the front of the room. Mr. Vance. The dean is looking for you. Jack turned around. My portfolio was left hanging halfway in the air. Then he left. I shoved the portfolio back into my bag. The sharp edge of the paper caught my finger, leaving a paper cut. But now, the opportunity had circled back. I typed out 2 words, I'm in. Chloe replied instantly, make sure she doesn't find out your topic this time. I looked up and saw Patrika standing right in the doorway of the classroom. She clearly heard that. I placed my phone face down on the desk and didn't bother lowering my voice. It doesn't matter if she knows. I'm doing a vintage photo wall. It's a classic, safe bet. Patrika's footsteps halted for half a second. She didn't walk into the classroom. She turned around and left. Chloe's eyes widened in horror. Are you out of your mind? Why would you tell her? I pulled out my sketchbook and wrote 2 words on the very first page. Audio archive. Chloe stared at the words, and a slow, wicked smile spread across her face. You are so damn evil. I clicked the cap back onto my pen. She loves showing up early to steal the spotlight, doesn't she? Let her. The day before the anniversary exhibition applications closed, Patrika submitted her proposal. A vintage photo wall. She threw it together incredibly fast. Too fast for it to be a genuinely original idea she had just brainstormed. People in the student council group chat started showering her with praise. Patrika's execution speed is insane. The logistics for sourcing the alumni photos in her proposal are so detailed. Wait, didn't Roselyn say she wanted to do a photo wall too? Patrika sent a cute little emoji into the chat. I had no idea Roselyn wanted to do the same thing. Should we team up? Chloe was so furious she practically slammed her phone onto the desk. She's pulling the exact same stunt. She either forces you to team up and share the credit, or she makes you look like a jealous bitch if you say no. I typed a reply in the group chat. No need. I changed my topic. The chat went completely silent for a few seconds. Patrika quickly replied, isn't it a bit late to change topics now? Won't you be rushing? I typed, it's fine. She replied again, let me know if you need any help. I stared at that line of text and smiled. Thanks, but I'm good. On the day of the panel review, the small auditorium was half full. The hardwood floors gleamed under the lights. The edges of the projector screen were slightly curled, and empty water bottles crowded the corners of the judges' tables. Patrika went first. She presented the vintage photo wall flawlessly. The photo sourcing process, the timeline, the alumni messages, the interactive photo spots, every single detail was rock solid. As she wrapped up, she looked directly at the judges' panel. I hope this wall allows everyone who returns to our campus to see the footprints they left behind. The room erupted in applause. As she walked off the stage, she passed right by me. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're up, Roselyn. Her tone made it perfectly clear. Let's see how you scramble your way out of this one. I walked up to the podium holding nothing but a single, black digital recorder. The projector lit up. There were no photos. Just a series of audio waveforms pulsing across the screen. I hit play. The first clip was the cafeteria lady. I've been serving food here for 20 years. Some of these kids come back 10 years after they graduate and still call me auntie. They tell me they miss the tomato and egg stir-fry from the second floor. The second clip was the campus security guard. There was this one girl studying for her master's exams. She came to the library at 6 a.m. every single day. I watched her walk through those doors from the dead of winter all the way through the summer heat. After she passed, she came back and gave me a tin of candies. The third clip was a retired professor. A university isn't made of brick and mortar. It's the kind of place that, long after a person walks out the gates, they still find themselves wanting to look back. The auditorium was dead silent. I saw someone on the judges' panel slowly put their pen down. Jack was sitting in the second row. He was resting his elbow on the armrest, his eyes locked onto the screen. He was wearing a dark gray jacket over a crisp white t-shirt. He was sitting in the shadows, but the light from the projector reflected perfectly in his eyes. I delivered my final line. Because of this, my pavilion won't ask people to stand in front of a wall and take pictures. I want them to put on a pair of headphones and listen to this university speak to them. The room stayed silent for 2 full seconds. Then the applause hit like a tidal wave. It was significantly louder than Patrika's. As I walked down the steps, I saw Patrika sitting in the front row. She was squeezing a plastic water bottle so hard the plastic was caving in. With a sharp crack, the bottle buckled. She looked up at me. That smug, victorious smile she usually wore was completely, entirely gone. I was officially named the lead curator for the anniversary exhibition. The moment the announcement went live, the group chats exploded. The audio archive idea is actually genius. I literally almost cried listening to the cafeteria lady. Roselyn absolutely killed it this time. Patrika didn't say a word. It took her 10 full minutes before she finally sent a message. Congratulations, Roselyn. 2 words, followed by a little flower emoji. Chloe stared at the emoji and sneered. Why do I feel like she's about to pull out a pair of garden shears and snip that flower's head off? I locked my phone screen. Sounds about right. Sure enough, the very next morning, a post popped up on the university's anonymous forum. The title read, Rigged Selection? Student changes proposal last minute and still wins first place. Is the review process actually fair? The post didn't explicitly name me, but it laid out my demographic details perfectly. Junior, female, recently changed her topic during a class presentation, known to have had contact with professionals from Ivy Studio. The comments immediately turned toxic. Wow, changing topics last minute gets you first place? Taking notes. Did someone leak the judge's preferences to her? Wasn't that Jack guy from Ivy Studio on the panel? Chloe was so furious she was practically vibrating. I'm reporting this post right now. I stopped her. Hold on. What are you waiting for? She's literally throwing dirt on your name. I took screenshots of the entire thread, making sure to capture the timestamps of every single comment. I'm waiting for her to double down. Chloe looked at me, then slowly put her phone down. By the afternoon, the post had blown up. An anonymous user dropped a photo in the thread. It was a picture of me handing my portfolio to Jack at the end of the recruitment seminar. The angle was incredibly malicious. It only captured my outstretched hand and Jack looking down, making it look exactly like we were secretly exchanging something illicit. The caption was a single word, "Makes sense." Chloe slammed her hand onto her desk. That photo could only have been taken by someone who was physically in the room that day. It's Patrika. It has to be. I stared at the photo for a few seconds. At the very edge of the frame, caught in the reflection of the glass door, was half of a creamy white sleeve. It was the exact same blouse Patrika was wearing that day. I sent the screenshots directly to the faculty advisor in charge of the student council, and forwarded a copy to Professor Davis. At 7 p.m., the department called an emergency meeting. The fluorescent lights in the conference room were blindingly white. A row of paper cups lined the long table, tea leaves floating on the surface of the hot water. The professors, my project team members, and the student council executives were all present. Patrika was sitting directly across from me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She spoke first. "Professor, I know everyone suspects me, but I swear I didn't write that post." Her voice broke, and someone immediately softened. "Patrika's usually really sweet. Yeah, maybe someone else is just jealous of Roselyn." I didn't rush to speak. Professor Davis looked at me. "Roselyn, do you have anything to say?" I turned my laptop around and hooked it up to the main display screen. The first slide was the timestamp of the forum post. The second slide was an official request log for the security footage from the student council office. The third slide was the metadata for the anonymous photo that had been uploaded to the forum. I said, the account that made the post logged in from computer number 3 in the public lab on the ground floor. The time was 12:47 p.m. Patrika's fingers twitched. I kept going. At that exact same time, a USB drive was plugged into computer number 3. The volume label on that drive is YQQ. Patrika's initials. Several heads in the room snapped toward Patrika. The color drained from her face. "That doesn't prove it was me. Anyone can change a volume label." I nodded. "You're right." Which is why I requested the security footage from the hallway outside the computer lab. A video popped up on the screen. Patrika walked into the lab, hugging her laptop bag to her chest. The timestamp read 12:44 p.m. She walked out holding a cup of milk tea. The timestamp read 12:52 p.m. The only sound in the conference room was the hum of the AC unit. Patrika shot up from her chair so fast it crashed into the wall behind her. "I just went in there to print some documents. I didn't write that post." Professor Davis's face was stone cold. "Sit down." She didn't sit. She stared at me, a desperate, cornered fire burning in her eyes. "Roselyn, why are you blowing this wildly out of proportion? Forget the post for a second. Can you look everyone in the eye and explain your private relationship with Mr. Vance?" She finally pulled her knife out. I looked at her, and the lingering annoyance in my chest finally settled into a cold, satisfying focus. All right. My turn. I clicked play on the next video. It was the security footage from the back of the lecture hall on the day of the recruitment seminar. The camera angle was crystal clear. Jack stepped down from the stage. I stood up with my portfolio. Patrika practically sprinted past me to shove her portfolio into his hands. Then, a professor called Jack away. I never once left the room alone with him. The video kept playing. Patrika stood by the doorway, raised her phone, and snapped a picture of me and Jack. The exact same picture from the forum. Someone in the room gasped loudly. Chloe crossed her arms and sneered. "Does that answer your 'forget the post for a second' question?" Patrika opened her mouth, but the words died in her throat. Tears finally spilled over her lashes, hitting the conference table with heavy taps. I just felt like it was unfair. Professor Davis pushed his paper cup to the side. Water sloshed over the rim, soaking the meeting minutes. Feeling something is unfair does not give you the right to fabricate vicious rumors about a classmate. Patrika lowered her head. Her shoulders shook violently. But I could see her hands hidden under the table. Her fists were clenched so tight her knuckles were bone white. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she did. She was calculating her next move. The room remained suffocatingly quiet after the department board dismissed us. Patrika was forced to sign a formal disciplinary acknowledgement on the spot. Her student council position was revoked, her academic record was flagged with a Level 2 Code of Conduct violation, and she was ordered to deliver a public apology in front of the department next Monday. When she walked out of the conference room, her shadow dragged along the brightly lit hallway tiles like an oily stain. Chloe slapped her palm against my shoulder the moment we turned the corner. Toward the courtyard. "Did you see her face? Roselyn, I swear, if you had given her 5 more minutes, she would have started chewing on the drywall. She looked insane." "She's not insane," I said, watching the distant figure of Patrika heading toward the north gate. "She's desperate. There's a difference." "Desperate for what?" "She's already ruined." "No," I murmured, clutching my laptop bag. "She's only ruined if she thinks the timeline has permanently shifted. Right now, she's just convinced she made a tactical error." A person who believes they possess the future doesn't give up after losing a single round. They just assume they played the wrong card. The university anniversary exhibition was slated for 3 weeks later. The crowning event of the semester wasn't just a simple student showcase, it was the unveiling of the old municipal grain silo revitalization project, a massive, multi-million-dollar urban renewal tender sponsored by the city government in direct partnership with Ivy Design Studio. The student team selected to lead the pavilion design would not only win the university's $5,000 purse, they would be handed a guaranteed fast-track junior project management role inside Ivy Studio, working directly under Jack Vance. In my previous life, or whatever reality Patrika had dragged her memories from, that project had been my magnum opus. I knew this because 3 days after the disciplinary hearing, while cleaning out my old physical archives in the department storage locker, I unearthed an old conceptual sketch pad from my freshman year. Hidden among the pages were bluing sketches of the municipal grain silo, kinetic sound diffusers, suspended glass acoustic bridges, and modular light pockets. I had sketched them years ago, long before the city even announced the silo's decommissioning. Patrika had stolen my research topics. She had stolen my exact phrasings. She had stolen my portfolio's exact spatial philosophy. She wasn't just guessing my moves. In whatever timeline she came from, she had lived through my career. She had seen my final prints, read my published essays, and memorized my triumphs. She had come back to play my life on easy mode. The rain returned on Tuesday night, heavy and persistent, rattling against the high glass windows of the central library. I sat at a corner desk on the 4th floor, flanked by stacks of structural engineering journals from the late 90s. Across the table, Chloe was fast asleep, her face pressed against an open textbook on urban hydrology. My laptop screen flickered. A new notification popped up in the department group portal. It was an updated list of candidates for the grain silo revitalization preliminary design pitch. There were only 2 names listed under the primary lead category: Roselyn Vance, Patrika Chen. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me. Despite the formal warning, despite the public disgrace of the anonymous forum post, Patrika had used her family's local commercial connections to bypass the standard department clearance. Her father's firm had signed on as a secondary material sponsor for the exhibition, effectively buying her back onto the playing field. She hadn't backed off. She had simply doubled down, raising the stakes to a level where money and future foresight could crush raw academic reputation. Footsteps echoed down the empty carpeted aisle. I didn't turn around. I listened to the rhythmic, calculated thud of high heels stopping right behind my chair. You think you're very clever, don't you, Roselyn? Patrika's voice was stripped of its former sweetness. There was no innocent lilt, no soft apology. It was raspy, dry, and cold. I flipped a page of the engineering journal without looking up. The library closes in 20 minutes, Patrika. If you're looking for the public computers, they're downstairs. Computer number 3 is still available, I believe. I heard her inhale sharply, her nails clicking against the edge of my wooden desk. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, leaning down so close I could smell the sharp, artificial scent of her floral perfume mixed with stale damp rain. This isn't how it goes. You were supposed to drop out of the exhibition after the forum post. You were supposed to retreat into the background, take the quiet research assistant job in the archive basement, and leave the silo project to Ivy Studio. I slowly turned my head to meet her gaze. Her eyes were bloodshot, dark shadows bruising the skin beneath her lower lashes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in a week, someone living in a constant, agonizing state of cognitive dissonance. Is that how it went the first time? I asked quietly. Patrika froze. The rain beat against the glass behind us, loud and rhythmic, like a ticking clock. For a fraction of a second, absolute, raw terror flashed across her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her pupils dilated until her eyes looked almost black. What did you say? She stammered, her voice barely a breath. I closed my journal with a heavy, muted thud. I asked if that's how your story was written, I said, my voice steady. Conversational. The story where you watch me work for years, memorize my every victory, write down every phrase that made Jack Vance turn his head, and then wake up one morning deciding you deserve to wear my skin. Patrika took a frantic step backward, her hands slamming against the adjacent bookshelf to steady herself. Books shuddered on the metal shelf. You're. She shook her head wildly, her knuckles turning chalk white against the book spines. No, that's impossible. You didn't. I don't have your memories, I interrupted, standing up slowly. I towered over Her in the dim light of the aisle. I don't need them. You see, Patrika, the problem with relying on the future is that you only remember the answers. You never bothered to learn the work. She stared at me, her chest heaving, her breathing shallow and ragged. You stole my bicycle shed topic, I continued, stepping around the table. You stole my portfolio opening line. You stole my historic district draft. But every time I changed the question, you choked. Because a cheat code only works if the game stays exactly the same. Patrika's fear suddenly twisted into something uglier, a sharp, desperate venom. She straightened her back, her chin trembling as she forced a terrible, cracked smile. It doesn't matter, she hissed, her voice trembling with manic intensity. It doesn't matter what you know. The silo project. I know every inch of it. I saw your final blueprints at the 2028 Venice Architecture Biennale. I know the exact structural beam configurations. I know the acoustic mapping calculations that made Jack Vance call you a genius. She took a step closer, her eyes wildly vacant. I have the final version, Roselyn. You haven't even designed it yet. You're still sitting here reading 30-year-old textbooks, while I already have the winning blueprint in my head. You can't change a project you haven't even created. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. She had traded her own mind, her own capacity to grow, for a stolen blueprint of someone else's future. She was a living ghost, haunting a life that wasn't hers. Then I wish you luck, Patrika, I said quietly, picking up my tote bag and nudging Chloe's shoulder to wake her up. Make sure you copy every single calculation correctly. Don't leave out a single detail. As Chloe groaned and rubbed her eyes, I walked past Patrika into the shadowy hallway. She didn't follow me. But as the elevator doors pulled apart, I heard her whisper into the dark library aisle. I won't fail. It's my life now. The next morning, I met Jack Vance at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the South Campus. The rain had cleared, leaving the pavement slick and black, reflecting the cold autumn sunlight. Jack was sitting in a corner booth, an iPad propped open beside a steaming mug of black Americano. When I sat down across from him, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. He slid a thick, dark gray folder across the marble tabletop. The department board cleared you of the forum allegations yesterday afternoon, Jack said, his deep voice slicing through the low murmur of the coffee shop's espresso machine. Professor Davis sent over the full report. I read the metadata logs. Dirty trick. It's over now, I said, opening the folder. Inside were the preliminary structural parameters for the municipal grain silo revitalization project. It's not over, Jack countered, leaning back and lacing his fingers together. Patrika's family firm just backed a $200,000 sponsorship for the main exhibition hall. They've commissioned a private fabrication studio in the industrial district to build her pitch model. She's bringing a full-scale kinetic acoustic prototype to the final review. I looked up from the dossier. A kinetic acoustic prototype? A circular modular frame made of aircraft-grade aluminum, suspended with tension cables, using dynamic acoustic paneling to redistribute interior sound resonance, Jack said, his eyes fixed on mine, watching my expression. It's an extraordinary concept. Overwhelmingly ambitious for an undergraduate student. In fact, it looks like something a senior partner at a top-tier European firm would design. I let out a very soft, quiet breath. The Venice Biennale 2028 model. She really had taken the exact blueprint from my future. She was building the exact structure I had spent 3 years calculating, testing, and refining in that other timeline. What's your response, Roselyn? Jack asked, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the table. Your audio archive submission was brilliant, but the grain silo project requires heavy structural execution. A sweet recording won't turn a 60-foot concrete silo into a functional public landmark. I looked out the window at the passing traffic. Mr. Vance, do you know why the municipal grain silo was decommissioned in the first place? I asked smoothly. Jack blinked, slightly caught off guard. The Port Authority relocated its shipping routes in 2012. That's the commercial reason, I said, pulling a yellow document out of my bag, the same textbook annex I had pulled from the library archives the night before. The structural reason was a severe load-bearing asymmetry in the north wall foundation, caused by an unmapped subterranean aquifer beneath the riverbank. It was flagged in the 1984 Municipal Land Survey, but the report was suppressed by the original contractors. Jack narrowed his eyes. An unmapped aquifer? In 1984, the concrete poured for the North Quadrant used high-density slag aggregate, I continued, pointing to a blurred blue diagram on the page. Under Normal conditions, it holds fine. But if you hang a heavy, centralized kinetic load, like a circular aluminum sound frame, from the internal ceiling trusses, without active counterweight dampening, I stopped. Jack caught on instantly. He was a master architect, he didn't need the math spelt out. The structural vibration frequency of the kinetic panels would match the natural resonance of the degraded slag aggregate, Jack muttered, his eyes widening slightly behind his dark frames. It wouldn't just fail. The dynamic movement would shear the ceiling trusses directly off the northern load-bearing wall. Precisely, I said. In a static digital rendering, the concept looks flawless. On paper, it's a masterpiece. But if you actually try to build it on site, or run a live physical load test, it's a structural death trap. Jack looked at me for a long, heavy 10 seconds. A faint, admiring smile slowly tugged at the corner of his mouth. In the final blueprint Patrika is preparing, Jack asked softly, does she have counterweight dampening included in her specs? No, I replied, leaning back against the leather booth. Because when I originally drew that concept years ago in my notebook, I hadn't solved the load-bearing math yet. The early draft was just a visual dream. It was beautiful, impossible, and fundamentally broken. Patrika had stolen my dream from the future. She had stolen the draft before I ever had the chance to fix the math. Jack let out a low, gravelly laugh, picking up his coffee mug. She stole the art, but she didn't know the physics. She didn't care about the physics, I corrected. She only cared about the applause. So, Jack said, setting his mug down with a crisp snap against the saucer. What are you going to do when she unveils her masterpiece at the exhibition? I looked down at the empty table, my reflection clear in the polished black marble. I'm going to let her present it, I said quietly. And then I'm going to ask her to turn it on. The final 2 weeks before the university anniversary exhibition moved with the quiet, terrifying velocity of a falling knife. Patrika didn't return to classes. She took an official leave of absence to work out of her father's private fabrication hangar in the industrial park. Reports leaked into the department group chat daily, high-end dynamic lighting arrays being delivered, custom aluminum alloy trusses imported from Germany, a team of 6 professional fabricators working round the clock under her direct supervision. She was sparing no expense. She was building a monumental physical testament to her stolen future. Meanwhile, Chloe and I spent our days in the dusty basement workshop of the architecture building, working on my submission. I didn't hire fabricators. I didn't order imported aluminum. I used salvaged timber from the university's old library renovations, basic copper wiring, and 8 calibrated acoustic directional speakers. Chloe sat on a wooden crate, sanding down a piece of reclaimed oak, her face dusted with fine white sawdust. Roselyn, are you sure about this? People are saying Patrika's installation looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. She's got LED floor grids and automated hydraulic lifts. Let her build a circus, I said, tightening a brass mounting bracket onto the wooden frame. A circus is great to look at until the tent poles snap. And you're sure her tent poles are going to snap? I picked up a multimeter, testing the resistance across the speaker circuit. Chloe, if you build a house using a drawing made by a 16-year-old who didn't know how gravity worked, what happens when you put a roof on it? Chloe paused her sanding, a wicked smile slowly dawning across her face. It falls down and squashes the 16-year-old. Exactly. On the night of the university anniversary exhibition, the grand main hall was transformed into a sea of blinding white lights, tailored suits, and heavy champagne flutes. The university administration had spared no effort. Deans from 3 neighboring institutions, local municipal city councilors, regional press, and the entire executive board of Ivy Design Studio were in attendance. The centerpiece of the entire exhibition floor was Patrika's installation. It was breathtaking. A 20-foot-tall, shimmering cylinder of polished, aircraft-grade aluminum, suspended 3 feet off the ground by invisible, high-tensile steel cables. Inside the cylinder hung dozens of delicate, geometric glass mirrors that rotated on tiny kinetic motors, reflecting light across the vaulted ceiling like a shattered diamond. It was bold, sleek, and undeniably expensive. A crowd of 50 people had already gathered around it, booing and awing as Patrika stood on a raised platform beside the control deck. She was wearing a tailored midnight blue pantsuit, her hair styled into a flawless, sharp bob. She held a sleek digital control tablet in her hand, talking to a group of smiling department donors with the polished grace of a seasoned executive. She looked triumphant. She looked like she had finally reclaimed her rightful place at the top of the world. My booth was positioned directly across from hers, on the opposite side of the central aisle. Compared to her high-tech monolith, my installation was humble, quiet, and warm. It was an open, timber-framed pavilion built from the reclaimed oak of the old campus library. Inside, 8 directional copper speakers hung low from wooden rafters, focused inward toward a central, polished granite seat. When a visitor sat down, light sensors triggered localized acoustic soundscapes, not loud music, but the subtle, layered resonance of the campus itself, the whisper of wind through the northern pines, the rain against the library skylights, the soft chatter of students from 50 years ago extracted from the university's magnetic tape archives. It was an architecture of memory. Real memory. Not stolen ones. At 8 p.m. sharp, the judging panel made their way down the central aisle. Professor Davis walked at the front, flanked by the Dean of Fine Arts, 2 city council members, and Jack Vance. The crowd parted as the judges stopped between the 2 competing installations. Professor Davis raised his microphone, his voice echoing through the acoustics of the high hall. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final pitch review for the Municipal Grain Silo Revitalization Project. Our 2 lead student finalists will now present their working prototype models. He turned to Patrika first. Patrika Chen, you have 10 minutes. Patrika stepped forward, her heels clicking crisply against the marble floor. She smiled at the judges, her eyes lingering on Jack Vance with a look of supreme confidence. Thank you, Professor Davis, members of the board, and Mr. Vance, Patrika began, her voice ringing out crisp and clear through her lapel microphone. When we look at the abandoned municipal grain silo, we see cold, dead concrete. But architecture should not be static. It should move. It should breathe. She tapped a button on her tablet. With a low hum of hydraulic power, the suspended aluminum ring began to rotate. The kinetic mirrors inside caught the spotlight, casting spinning beams of golden light across the hall. The crowd let out a collective gasping sound of awe. My proposal, the kinetic acoustic resonator, uses dynamic ceiling suspension to transform the interior of the silo into a living soundboard, Patrika declared, her voice rising with dramatic flair. By using high-frequency motor arrays, the panels shift in real time to adapt to human voices below, creating a space where sound and light become one. Jack Vance stood in the front row, his hands shoved deep into his trousers pockets. His expression was completely unreadable. An impressive visual presentation, Professor Davis remarked, nodding approvingly. And the structural calculations for the live load suspension? Patrika's smile widened. She had prepared for this. She had memorized every line of my future project notes. The structure utilizes 3-point central tension cable rigging, rated for up to 12,000 pounds of dynamic force, she stated proudly. It requires 0 floor-based load pillars, leaving the entire 60-foot floor of the grain silo completely open for public gatherings. She glanced across the aisle at me, her eyes flashing with a cold, ruthless victory. I won, her eyes said. I took your masterpiece, and I built it. Professor Davis looked at Jack. Jack. Any questions before we move to Roselyn's presentation? Jack stepped forward, his polished shoes stopping right at the perimeter line of Patrika's metallic structure. Just one, Jack said softly. Patrika inclined her head gracefully. Please, Mr. Vance. Your 3-point central tension system, Jack said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the silent room. It relies entirely on the structural integrity of the upper ceiling ring trusses to absorb the dynamic kinetic feedback, correct? Yes, Patrika answered without hesitation. It transfers the load horizontally into the concrete shell. And what happens, Jack continued, taking a step closer to the control deck. When the kinetic motors reach 300 revolutions per minute, generating a lateral vibration frequency of 42 Hz against a high-density aggregate wall that suffers from subterranean moisture degradation? Patrika's smile flickered for a fraction of a second. A tiny, subtle crack appeared in her composure. Excuse me, she asked, her finger twitching slightly on the tablet screen. The north wall of the municipal grain silo, Jack explained, pointing to the structural schematic displayed on Patrika's own presentation screen. It was built in 1984 over a subterranean river aquifer. The slag aggregate inside the concrete has experienced structural microfracturing for 40 years. It cannot handle lateral vibrational resonance above 30 Hz without shear failure. Patrika's face paled slightly, but she quickly forced a stiff laugh. Mr. Vance, I've run full digital stress simulations on this exact model, she said, her voice rising in pitch, a nervous edge creeping into her words. The math is rock solid. The dynamic load distribution balances out the vibration. In a static computer model, yes, Jack said calmly. In a digital world where concrete doesn't age and water doesn't erode stone. But this isn't a digital model, Patrika. This is a real physical structure. He turned his head slowly toward me. Roselyn, care to explain? Every head in the grand hall snapped toward my booth. I stepped out from behind my wooden oak frame, holding a simple binder containing 50 years of municipal land survey documents. Patrika's design is visually stunning, I said, my voice steady, echoing softly through the quiet room. It is, in fact, an incredible piece of artistic sculpture. But as an architectural proposal for the grain silo, it contains a fatal flaw. I pointed to the main display board behind Patrika. When you suspend a dynamic kinetic load from a single ceiling junction in a structure with asymmetrical foundation weakness, you create a harmonic resonance loop. If you turn those kinetic motors on to their full operational capacity, the vibration won't distribute horizontally. It will concentrate at the weakest structural point, the northern ceiling joint. Patrika's hands began to shake, visible against the dark casing of her tablet. That's lie, she shouted, dropping her polished executive demeanor completely. You're lying. You're just trying to undermine my presentation. Because you couldn't build something this complex. You don't have the funding. You don't have the technology. I don't need to lie, Patrika, I said gently, looking her dead in the eye. The physics don't lie. If you don't believe me, run the live stress test on your model right now. Set the motor array to 42 Hz, the actual operational frequency required to drive those glass mirrors. Don't tell me what to do. Patrika snapped, her eyes wide, unblinking, crazy. I know this design. I know it better than anyone in this room. It worked. It won the Biennale. It was praised by every architectural journal in Europe. The hall went dead silent. Professor Davis frowned, his brows knitting together in complete confusion. The Biennale? Patrika, what are you talking about? The Biennale isn't until I built it. Patrika screamed, completely losing control, her voice breaking into a hysterical screech. I took it from her because she didn't deserve it. She sat on this design for years. I brought it to life. I made it real. She slammed her thumb onto the touch screen of her tablet. I'll prove it to you. Look at it. Look at how perfect it is. The tablet beeped sharply. High-pitched electrical whirring exploded from the metallic cylinder. The motorized glass mirrors inside began to spin violently. The aluminum frame began to rotate faster and faster, light flashing across the ceiling like strobe flashes in a storm. 100 revolutions per minute. 200 revolutions per minute. 300 revolutions per minute. A low, deep, terrifying hum began to resonate from the metal frame. It wasn't a sleek, smooth acoustic hum. It was a harsh, shuddering vibration that rattled the glass champagne flutes on the nearby catering tables. The heavy steel cable suspending the structure began to whip wildly back and forth, grinding against the ceiling mount hooks with a sound like tearing metal. Clang. 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 Shut it down. Professor Davis yelled, backing away in alarm. Patrika, turn off the motor array. No. Look at it. Patrika laughed hysterically, her eyes fixated on the spinning monstrosity. Look at the sound dynamics. It's stable. It's snap. A tension cable snapped with the explosive report of a gunshot. The right side of the 20-foot aluminum cylinder sagged violently, slamming sideways into its own support frame. Glass mirrors shattered in midair, showering down onto the platform like a rain of sharp, sparkling ice. The metal frame buckled under its own undampened vibration, twisting into an ugly, ruined mass of bent aluminum and severed copper wiring. The kinetic motors screeched, sparked violently, and died, leaving a thick haze of blue smoke drifting toward the ceiling lights. Panic rippled through the front row of spectators as people scrambled backward, knocking over chairs and spilling drinks. When the smoke cleared, the silver masterpiece was nothing more than a crushed, twisted pile of expensive junk. Patrika stood frozen on the raised platform. The tablet slipped from her limp fingers, shattering against the marble floor. She stared at the ruined wreckage, her mouth hanging open, her skin ghostly white. No, she whimpered, her voice tiny, fragile, broken. No, it was supposed to be perfect. You fixed it, in 2027. You used the reinforced tension rods, in the final blueprint. She slowly turned her head, looking at me through the drifting haze of mechanical smoke. Where are the tension rods, Roselyn? She whispered, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. Why didn't you put the tension rods in the drawing? I stood beside my oak pavilion, surrounded by the warm, quiet sound of pine needles rustling through my speakers. Because in 2027, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet, ruined hall, I spent 6 months fixing my mistake. I took a step forward, looking up at her broken figure. You took my homework, Patrika. But you didn't realize I hadn't finished doing The math. The aftermath was swift, absolute, and devoid of drama. The university security team escorted Patrika off the exhibition grounds 10 minutes later. Her manic outbursts about 2027, the Biennale, and the future timeline were witnessed by over 100 high-profile guests, including university trustees and regional press reporters. By midnight, her family firm had officially pulled its sponsorship to contain the public relations disaster. By the next morning, the university board had initiated a formal psychiatric evaluation and an academic fraud investigation. The custom-fabricated model she brought was revealed to have been largely produced by third-party industrial engineers using falsified safety compliance certificates, a direct violation of university ethics rules. She was formally expelled 48 hours later. 1 week after the exhibition, the rain had finally stopped, giving way to a crisp, pristine winter morning. The university's central lawn was covered in a thin dusting of white frost that sparkled under the golden morning light. I stood in the center of my completed grain silo timber pavilion. The exhibition had concluded, but the university administration had voted to keep my installation permanently installed in the central courtyard as a historic campus landmark. The wooden rafters smelled rich, earthy, and warm. When you sat on the granite bench in the center, you couldn't hear the noise of the city outside, only the soft, layered history of the land beneath your feet. Footsteps crunched across the frosted grass outside. Jack Vance walked into the pavilion, holding 2 paper cups of hot coffee. He handed one to me, the steam rising into the cold morning air. The city council officially approved the grain silo revitalization contract. This morning, Jack said, leaning his back against one of the oak support beams. Ivy Studio is taking the lead, and your audio timber design is the core blueprint for the entire master plan. I took a slow sip of the coffee. And the subterranean aquifer? We're installing subterranean counterweight dampening wells in the north quadrant, Jack smiled, his eyes twinkling with quiet humor. Just like your revised engineering notes suggested. He looked at me over the rim of his cup. I spoke with Professor Davis yesterday, Jack added casually. He told me Patrika Chen's parents have checked her into a private medical facility in the south. She's still claiming that she lived through the next 10 years. She keeps telling her doctors that the world went wrong because you changed the script. I looked up at the sky through the open wooden rafters of my pavilion. The clouds were drifting slowly, revealing a vast, infinite blue. She thought the future was something written in a book, I said softly. Something you could just read, copy, and claim as your own. And what is it actually? Jack asked. I smiled, setting my coffee cup down on the granite seat, feeling the cold, solid weight of the stone beneath my fingertips. It's just the work you choose to do today. 3 years later. Venice, Italy. The light off the Grand Canal was blindingly bright, casting golden ripples across the ancient stone facades of the city. The 2028 Venice Architecture Biennale was in full swing. Hundreds of international journalists, world-renowned architects, and design critics packed the main exhibition hall of the Palazzo. At the center of the main pavilion stood a massive, breathtaking wooden and glass acoustic installation, the completed municipal grain silo revitalization project, featured as the primary global highlight of the year. A young assistant bumped into me as I stood near the entrance, holding a stack of fresh press releases. Miss Vance. I'm so sorry, the assistant gasped, dropping a folder. It's fine, I said, leaning down to help her pick up the papers. As I handed them back, the assistant looked at me with wide, awestruck eyes. Your speech is in 5 minutes, Miss Vance. The judges are waiting for the opening address. I'll be right there, I said with a smile. The assistant hurried off into the buzzing crowd. I turned and walked toward the high arched balcony overseeing the canal. The cool sea breeze swept through my hair, carrying the smell of salt and old stone. In my pocket, my phone buzzed softly. It was a text from Chloe, back in the States, attached with a photo of our old dorm room, now occupied by 2 nervous-looking freshmen sitting at our old desks. Chloe, remember when we thought counting light bulbs in the bicycle shed was the peak of our careers? Congrats on Venice, Roselyn. You built your own world. I closed my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Below the balcony, the water moved in endless, unpredictable waves, constantly shifting, constantly new. I looked out at the horizon, taking a long, deep breath of the cold sea air, and walked toward the stage to claim a future that belonged to no one else but me.